4. Cocks, which come from any distance, are almost always favorites. For the theory is the man will not have dared to bring it if it was not a good cock. The more so the further he has come. His followers are, of course, obliged to support him, and when the more grand-scale legal cockfights are held on holidays and so on, the people of the village take what they regard to be the best cocks in the village, regardless of ownership, and go off to support them, although they will almost certainly have to give odds on them and to make large bets to show that they are not a sheepscape village. Actually, such away games, though infrequent, tend to mend the ruptures between village members that the constantly occurring home games, where village factions are opposed rather than united, exacerbate. 5. Almost all matches are sociologically relevant. You seldom get two outsider cocks fighting, or two cocks with no particular group backing, or with group backing which is mutually unrelated in any clear way. When you do get them, the game is very shallow, betting very slow, and the whole thing very dull, with no one save immediate principles and an added gambler or two at all interested. By the same token, you rarely get two cocks from the same group, even more rarely from the same subfaction, and virtually never from the same subfaction, which will be in most cases one extended family fighting. Similarly, in outside village fights, two members of the village will rarely fight against one another, even though as bitter rivals they will do so with enthusiasm so their home grounds. 7. On the virtual level, people involved in an institutionalized hostility relationship, called puik, in which they do not speak or otherwise have anything to do with each other. The causes of this formal breaking of relations are many: wife capture, inheritance arguments, political differences will bet very heavily, sometimes almost maniacally, against one another in what is a frank and direct attack on the very masculinity, the ultimate ground of his status, of the opponent. 8. The center bet coalition is, in all but the shallowest games, always made up by structural allies. No outside money is involved. What is outside depends upon the context, of course, but given it, no outside money is mixed in with the main bet. If the principals cannot raise it, it is not made. The center bet, again, especially in deeper games, is thus the more direct and open expression of social opposition, which is one of the reasons why bolded and matchmaking are surrounded by such an air of unease, furtiveness, embarrassment, and so on. 9. The rule about borrowing money, that you may borrow for a bet but not in one, steams, and the Balinese are quite conscious of this. From similar considerations, you are never at the economic mercy of your enemy that way. Gambling bets, which can get quite large on a rather short-term basis, are always to friends, never to enemies, structurally speaking. 10. When two cocks are structurally irrelevant or neutral so far as you are concerned, though as mentioned they almost never are to each other, you do not even ask a relative or a friend whom he is betting on, because if you know how he is betting and he knows you know and you'd go the other way, it will lead to strain. This rule is explicit and rigid, fairly elaborate, even rather artificial precautions are taken to avoid breaking it. At the very least, you must pretend not to notice what he is doing and he what you are doing. 11. There is a special word for betting against the grain, which is also the word for pardon me, pura. It is considered a bad thing to do, though if the center bet is small, it is sometimes alright as long as you do not do it too often. But the larger the bet and the more frequently you do it, the more the pardon me tag will lead to social disruption. In fact, the institutionalized hostility relation PUIC is often formally initiated, though its causes always lie elsewhere. But such a pardon me bet in a deep fight, putting the symbolic fat in the fire. Similarly, the end of such a relationship and resumption of formal social intercourse is often signalized, but again, not actually brought about by one or the other of the enemies supporting the other's birth. 13. In sticky cross-loyalty situations, of which in this extraordinarily complex social system there are of course many, where a man is caught between two more or less equally balanced loyalties, he tends to wander off for a cup of coffee or something to avoid having to bet, a form of behavior reminiscent of that of American voters in similar situations. 14. The people involved in the center bet are, especially in deep fights, virtually always leading members of their group, kinship, village, or whatever. Further, those who bet on the side, including these people, are, as I have already remarked, the more established members of the village, the solid citizens. Cockfighting is for those who are involved in the everyday politics of prestige as well, not for youth, women, subordinates, and so forth. 15. So far as money is concerned, the explicitly expressed attitude toward it is that it is in a secondary matter. It is not, as I have said, of no importance. Balinese are no happier to lose several weeks' income than anyone else, but they mainly look on the monetary aspects of the cockfight as self-balancing, a matter of just moving money around, circulating it among a fairly well-defined group of serious cockfighters. The really important wins and losses are seen mostly in the other terms, and the general attitude toward wagering is not any hope of cleaning up, of making a killing, addict gamblers again accepted, but that of the horse players prayer. Oh God, please let me break even. In prestige terms, however, you do not want to break even, but in a momentary, punctual sort of way will win utterly. The talk which goes on all the time is about fights against such and such a cock of so and so which your cock demolished, not on how much you won. A fact people, even for large bets, rarely remember for any length of time. Though they will be remember the day they did in Panlog's finest cock for years. 16. You must bet on cocks of your own group aside from mere loyalty considerations. For it you do not people generally will say for it for if you do not people generally will say, what, is he too proud for the likes of us? Does he have to go to Java or Denpasar, the capital town, to bet he is such an important man? Thus there is a general pressure to bet only to show that you are important locally, but that you are not important, that you look down on everyone else as unfit even to be rivals. Similarly, home teams people must bet against outside cocks, or the outsiders will accuse them a serious charge of just collecting entry fees and not really being interested in cockfighting, as well as again being arrogant and insulting. 17. Finally, the Balinese peasants themselves are quite aware of all this and can end, at least to an ethnographer, to state most of it in approximately the same terms as I have. Fighting cocks. Almost every Balinese I have ever discussed the subject with has said is like playing with fire, only not getting burned. Your active village and king group rivalries and hostilities, but in play form, coming dangerously and entrancingly close to the expression of open and direct interpersonal and intergroup aggression, something which, again, almost never happens in the normal course of ordinary life, but not quite, because after all, it is only a cockfight. More observation of this sort could be advanced, but perhaps the general point is, if not made, at least well delineated, and the whole argument thus far can be usefully summarized in a formal paradigm. The more a match is one between near status equal and or personal enemies, 2 between high status individuals. The deeper the match, 1, the closer the identification of cock and man, or more properly, the deeper the match, the more the man will advance his best, most closely identify with cock. 2. The finer the cocks involved and the more exactly they will be matched. 3. The greater the emotion that will be involved and the more the general absorption in the match. 4. The higher the individual bets, center and outside, the shorter the outside bets odds will tend to be, and the more betting there will be overall. 5. The less an economic and the more a status view of gambling will be involved, and the solider the citizens who will be gaming. Inverse arguments hold for the shallower the fight, culminating in a reversed sign sense in the coin spinning and the dice throwing amusements. For deep fights, there are no absolute upper limits, though there are, of course, practical ones. And there are a great many legend-like tales of great duel in the sun, combats between lords and princes in classical times. For cockfighting has always been as much an elite concern as a popular one. far deeper than anything anyone, even aristocrats, could produce today anywhere in Bali. Indeed, one of the great cultural heroes of Bali is a prince called after his passion for the sport, the cockfighter, who happened to be away at a very deep cockfight with a neighboring prince when the whole of his family, father, brothers, wives, sisters, were assassinated by commoner usurpers. Thus spared, he returned to dispatch the upstart, regain the throne, reconstitute the Balinese high tradition, and build its most powerful, glorious, and prosperous state. Along with everything else that the Balinese see in fighting cocks themselves, their social order, abstract hatred, masculinity, demonic power, they also see the archetype of status virtue, the arrogant, resolute, honor-mad player with real fire, the Kshatriya prince. Fetters, blood, crowds, and money. Poetry makes nothing happen. Auden says in his Elegy of Yeats, it survives in the valley. It survives in the valley of its saying, a way of happening, a mouth. The cockfight too, in this colloquial sense, makes nothing happen. Men go on aleatorically humiliating one another and being allegorically humiliated by one another, day after day, glorying quietly in the experience if they have triumphed, crushed only slightly more openly by it if they have not. But no one's status will really change. You cannot ascend the status ladder by winning cockfights. You cannot, as an individual, really ascend it at all, nor can you descend it that way. All you can do is enjoy and savor, or suffer and withstand the concocted sensation of drastic and momentary movement along an aesthetic semblance of that ladder. A king of behind the mirror status jump, which has the look of mobility without its actuality. Like any art form, for that finally is what we are dealing with. The cockfight renders ordinary, everyday experience comprehensible by presenting it in terms of acts and objects which have had their practical consequences removed and been reduced, or if you prefer, raised to the level of sheer appearances, where their meaning can be more powerfully articulated and more exactly perceived. The cockfight is really real only to the cocks. It does not kill anyone, castrate anyone, reduce anyone to animal status, alter the hierarchical relations among people, of refashion the hierarchy. It does not even redistribute income in any significant way. What it does is what for other peoples with other temperaments and other conventions, leer and crime and punishment do. It cashes up these themes: death, masculinity, rage, pride, loss, beneficence, chance, and ordering them into an encompassing structure presents them in such a way as to throw into relief a particular view of their essential nature. It puts a construction on them, makes them, to those historically positioned to appreciate the construction, meaningful, visible, tangible, graspable, real in an ideational sense, an image, fiction, a model, a metaphor. The cockfight is a means of expression. Its function is neither to assuage social passions nor to hate them, them, though it is playing with fire way. In its playing with fire way, it does a bit of both, but in a medium of theaters, blood, crowds, and money to display them.